The Kurzweil K2000 was released by Kurzweil Music Systems in 1990. It was an all-in-one digital workstation with sampler, sequencer, effects, and a very complex digital synthesis system called VAST, which stands for Variable Architecture Synthesis Technology. It was, and still is, a monster. Its revolutionary synthesizer can mimic any form of synthesis. Fat analog filters that arguably sound better than fat analogs, LA synthesis that's better than the D50 or the M1, amplitude modulation, pulse width modulation, FM synthesis that makes the Yamaha DX7 jealous. The filters are brilliant. They're responsive, they're juicy, high pass, low pass, band pass, all pass, notch pass, you name it, it's got it. The digital distortion and wave shaping on the K2000 are awesome. They range from subtle warmth to absolute destruction. Yamaha would not license their DX7 algorithm to Kurzweil, so Kurzweil had to reinvent frequency modulation synthesis, and they did it. It's easier to understand, it's a breeze to program, and it sounds way better. Fuck the DX7. Seriously, it can fuck off. Hey Yamaha, you fucked synthesis so badly when you released that brick of shit. The K2000 took it another step further when they added sampling, so you could apply different forms of synthesis to the actual samples and drastically manipulate the sounds. Simple waves become massive analog hell clouds. Audio files like drum loops can be twisted into horrendous digital paste. This revolution in sound technology gave rise to the cyberpunk sound. Standout albums included Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness by Smashing Pumpkins, Antichrist Superstar by Marilyn Manson, The Downward Spiral by Nine Inch Nails, Hardwired by Frontline Assembly, and every other record released from 1990 to 2000. Every single record. And the crazy thing is that due to the insane versatility of this beast, it could produce an extremely wide variety of sounds. This machine can create beauty and cold, alienating horror. It still rocks. You can assign more filter or distortion to the velocity, so the harder you hit the key, the more effect it gets. You can also assign a MIDI controller to the filter or distortion, so you can have a more fluid control over the filter or distortion. Many of angelspit's sounds utilize the K2000. You can loop the samples bidirectionally, which means they play forwards and then they play backwards. Here we can hear the sample going forward. Now the sample's going backwards. Sample's going forwards again. Loops around and goes backwards, which makes looping much easier. But enough of the specs. Let's sample. All samples in this session are recorded at 96K 24-bit, which means high quality. So this is a salad bowl and it's bolted to a piece of wood and there's bits of spikes through it. These are like 1/8" pieces of metal and they're connected via springs. So we're gonna sample this thing. I'm gonna pick the springs. Now I'm going to bow it. That's nice. This is a bread knife. I was sharpening it the other night and I noticed that it has a difference in pitch. So anyway, I just went, wow, I'm so using that. My wife, incidentally, is amazing because she knows if she leaves anything metal out, I'm gonna bang it. All right, so here we go. Once I've done the sampling, I drag it into the audio editing software. I have covered this before, but some of you have asked me to go into it again, but with more details. So here we go. I'm using a special filter that will only allow the high frequencies to pass through it. It's called a high pass filter. I remove all bass frequencies under 50 cycles, that's 50 cycles per second, as you're not going to hear them. They're going to clutter the mix up. With some samples, I'll take out more low frequencies because you don't need them. For example, if it's a hi-hat or a mid-high pad sort of sound, I'll take out 100, maybe even 150. So here's an example. This is before the high pass filter. And this is after the high pass filter. Hear how I've taken that bass rumble out. You're only going to be able to hear the difference if you're listening through good speakers or through good headphones. But you can see how information has been removed from the audio file. Why take out low frequencies? Well, let's say the lowest frequency of a sound is 100 cycles. That's 100 vibrations per second. If you play that sound 2 octaves lower, you will have sonic elements at 25 cycles. Because each octave you go lower, it halves the frequency. 25 cycles is going to really clutter up your mix. Keep what you need, filter out everything else. Obviously, if it's a bass sound, it will be treated differently. Usually I won't actually take any low frequencies out of a bass sound, I'll just leave them in there. Next, I normalize the sound to minus 0.1 decibels. This is going to make the sound as loud as it possibly can be without distorting it. This is before normalizing. This is after normalizing. Next, I add compression. This beefs up the sound, making the quiet bits louder. This is before compression. So the specs on that compression is threshold is minus 8 dB, the ratio is 3.5 to 1, the attack is 0, and the release time is 360 milliseconds. This is after compression. Compression makes it more in your face. Next, I remove the noise floor using a very special noise filter. You'll need good speakers or headphones to hear the difference on this one. This is actually really important because noisy samples will add to the noise floor, and this can become audible in the mastering process, and that's a problem. Next, I cut out the silence before and after the sound, so it will start as soon as the key is pressed and not have any dead space at the end of the sound. I will also fade out the sound at the end. This makes sure that the tail is smooth. I save the individual samples at 16-bit 44.1 kHz, which the K2000 prefers, and this is also CD quality. Then I transfer the samples to the K2000 via a zip disk. Remember them? Luckily, the K2000 imports WAV files from DOS formatted disks. Next, I place the sounds across the keyboard and try to pitch them. Pitching a sound can be a complete pain because some sounds don't have a clear pitch. If I showed you this process, we'd be here for hours. But here's one I prepared earlier. I take different versions of the same sample, I place them across the keyboard so I can play the same pitch using different notes. I can also assign the different sounds to become different layers. So different versions of the same pitch of that sound will play depending on how hard you hit the key. If all of this is sounding familiar, it's because this is exactly what we did last month. But last month we used the Emax sampler. The K2000 is a totally different machine to the Emax. Both machines' sound and technology give them a different sonic texture. This adds to the music's depth and diversity. I love using hardware samples because they force you to focus on the details. So grab a mic and sample your own sounds. Let these sounds shape your music and define your sound. And have fun with hunting for sounds. Go on a sound safari, visit a junkyard, do a recording in an underground car park. Use a sampler to manipulate and play sounds in new ways. Get a musical sound and make it sound noisy. Get a non-musical sound and make it sound musical. Experiment. Make mistakes. Accidentally discover something new. Have fun. The K2000 was released 30 years ago. The lesson is that you do not need new technology to make new art. It does not need to be expensive or collectible or cool. Music comes from you, not the machine. Now go forth and make your art.